Michael, I wanted to bring you on because you had a great story about the contracts that have recently been distributed to wide receivers around the league. So go back to right before training camp last year. Jets got a new deal done with Garrett Wilson. Break down how that contract has now aged, because I think if you're a Jet fan, Darren Mougey in the front office, they deserve a lot of credit for getting that deal done when they did.
Yeah, I think that's a theme you've seen. They've been proactive with extensions. We saw Garrett last year, and Brees. Obviously, there was some drama with it going into this offseason, but you get it done pre Achan, and that immediately ages pretty well. But with Garrett Wilson, you look at it now, and Christian Watson just re-signed with Green Bay, and he's only 5 spots behind Wilson on the wide receiver leaderboard in terms of total value, with a difference of about a little under $5 million per year. And this is a guy who hasn't had a 700-yard season in his career versus Garrett Wilson. Obviously, we know 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons before his injury this year, and he would have hit it again if he was healthy. So there's a much bigger disparity between these two players than the 5 spots on that total value contract leaderboard, than about $5 million per year. And that's the reward of being proactive with extensions, because really the way it works in a rising salary cap league is that whoever's next is going to get, the market redefining deal. So the quicker you go, the better it's going to age. And it's good to see that the Jets have been proactive with that, because sometimes these numbers drop and you see Garrett Wilson 4/130 or Brees Hall, his numbers, and you look at it at the time and you say, are they worth that much? But you have to think a year ahead and how many spots lower they're going to be once other players who are either equally as good or less good are going to get paid more than that. So I think that if you're looking for positives regarding Darren Mougey, the proactive extensions are a big one to put near the top.
Well, if you just think about when Garrett signed the deal, he was making roughly $32.5 million. Since he signed that deal, we now have wide receivers in the league making over $42 million
Yeah.
per season. Jackson Smith and Jigba is at 42.1 AAV. Jamar Chase had the previous record at 40. We just saw Drake London get paid the other day. He's now the third highest paid wide receiver in the league at 35. I'm sorry, Drake London's had one 1,000-yard season. Garrett Wilson's been better. And as we continue to progress through these wide receivers getting paid more and more, I think the Jets' proactiveness there is going to pay off dividends, because in all likelihood, they have a rookie quarterback that they're going to be adding to their team in 2027, very high in the first round. That player is not going to make a ton. You have $150 million in projected cap space on your books for next year that you could use to help support the team. Like, they are really set up to be able to kind of stock this roster. They got to figure out coach, and we understand all that, but just from a front office standpoint, I have a lot of confidence in the job Darren Mougey has done to this point. What say you?
Yeah, and another thing on that note is that Garrett Wilson's value is hard to quantify with the numbers, because a lot of the guys you're comparing him against recorded their production with better quarterbacks. Like even Watson, we're talking about a guy who Wilson's already way ahead of, but Watson's played with Jordan Love compared to what Garrett Wilson has had to deal with. So you're projecting that pure talent-wise, his impact is well ahead of what the numbers say, and that hopefully with better quarterbacking, even if it's just competent, his numbers will start to be even further ahead of where they already have been. So you like the projection, and that applies to Brees Hall too, with hopefully better game scripts and blocking, things like that. But I think process-wise, there are a lot of positive things with this front office, and we said that at times with Joe Douglas. So it's got to translate at some point before you can truly trust it. But in the moment, there's just a lot of competency to the moves that the Jets make. I feel like throughout this offseason, there's not a lot that they did that I look at and feel like, what on earth are they thinking? Draft was a little unconventional, maybe to what we expected, but when it all came together, I think you see the vision and what some of the common values and priorities were. When you take all of those picks together, you see the upside, the emphasis on athletic traits and offensive weaponry and pass rush, pass defense as a whole, premium spots of offense and defense. So yeah, it's just hard to really look at much of it and say, what are they doing? And it doesn't mean it's going to work, but it feels like the process is sound, and that's the least you could hope for at this point.
I agree with you. In terms of Glenn and Mougey, obviously Glenn played a major part in Mougey getting the job as the GM, but we've seen this. Sometimes the guy that helps you get the job, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to be attached at the hip. What's your feel for the long-term future of these guys? Do you think they're attached? One has to be adjointed with the other, or is there a path where Mougey's here a year from now and there's a different head coach that's not Aaron Glenn?
I really don't think they're attached. I think Muji has more rope because, like, especially now that they've had 2 off seasons to build it up, and an off season here where they spent a good amount of capital to upgrade the roster, and I think there's enough there to where you expect a respectable type of season, even if it's not playoffs. I think there is a world where you feel like the team performance is below the talent level on the roster. It doesn't measure up to the quality of the process. And you could see Aaron Glenn held accountable for that, whereas Muji is not. So I do think Muji has more rope. But there could also be a world where the draft picks are just atrocious and they go together. Like, the moves don't pan out. They clearly don't have talent and they don't have coaching, and maybe they go together. But Glenn is in such an interesting spot because, I think you hired him and you make those in-season trades last year and you think, this is at least a 3-year process, but the season went so poorly that there was a lot of one and done talk after last year, which I was a big part of that. And, now he's back. He gets a second chance, but how much more rope is there? Because, the timeline you created is 3 years with those 27 draft picks being such a big part of this long-term rebuild. But you're also looking at a coach who, if he can't show you at least competent coaching this year, it just feels like a waste of time to go a third year. So it will be interesting to see what that rope kind of looks like and what the bar is he has to meet to justify a third season.
Just don't let go of the rope.
Just don't let go, Michael. All right, don't let go of that rope.
It's a good one. It's a good one. The timing of that was very poor, I think, for Jets fans. But we'll see. We'll see.
The Jake Asman Show is now presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a daily fantasy app made simple. Just pick more or less on your favorite players' projections and build your lineup in seconds. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. And PrizePicks is already offering NFL futures, including futures for New York Jets players. Take a look at the lineup that you see on the screen. Garrett Wilson, more than 4.5 reception touchdowns. David Bailey, he's going to have at least 7 sacks his rookie year. Arvell Reese, almost a Jet. I think he'll have at least 3 sacks in his rookie year with the Giants. That is a 3-pick power play, $10 to pay out $60. That is just an example of some of the lineups you can make over at PrizePicks. Make your own lineups today for any sport. Just download the PrizePicks app, use the code HMA, and get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. What in your mind, what you from how you evaluate Glenn, what do you think it will take for him to be the coach in 2027? Like what do you picture? I can't just say what's the win total because I think that's misleading. I don't think it's just a arbitrary number. Obviously, they win 4 or 5 games. I think he's gone. But if he wins 7 games, he's definitely. I don't know about that. What if they have 6 going into the last game of the year and they beat the Bills playing none of their starters? Like,
right.
I think there's a lot of nuance to the Glenn conversation. But from your perspective, what would he have to do where you'd want him back for a third year?
Yeah, it's definitely simplistic to put a win total on it because I think more important than the win total is the quality of play, because the quality of play this past season, not that there's a good 3 wins, but the number of blowouts they took versus the fact that they didn't even come close to blowing anyone out. And, they were not good in clutch moments. Like the quality of play was poor. So regardless of the win total itself, like you want to see them blow some teams out sometimes and be competitive in most games and avoid getting blown out. So I look at it that way, like the totality of it all, your point differential, how it all looks when, accumulated. And then I just want to look at him independently. Is he improving at game management? Because there were so many things, especially the first half of last year when they were in a lot of those games where it just felt like it was hard to even understand what the thought process was. And sometimes it felt like even he couldn't explain it in the press conferences, especially when you think back to the Denver game. And, he didn't know the field goal distance. He didn't, it just felt like there wasn't a sound process there. So I would say the totality of the product, regardless of the win total and just the quality of it. And then looking at him individually, how does he manage games? And then now he's a defensive play caller. So they're trying to extract value from that and, see if it's something extra he can bring to the table in addition to just the CEO stuff. So you also have to look at that. How effective is he at running his own defense when he also has to run a team? So I think those are the two things: overall quality of the product and just independent of the win total and the talent. How does he do in areas he can control?
And in terms of like the defense, I mean, he's obviously controlling it, but I think the Jet defense will be better than it was last year. That's not saying much, though. He wasn't that great in Detroit. I know you run the numbers as well. Like the last year was pretty good, but there's context to it. They had the best offense in the sport, which certainly helps the defense. That said, he did a nice job that last year. Looking at the personnel the Jets have and what you know about an Aaron Glenn defense based on his 4 years as a DC with the Lions, what are fair expectations for the Jet defense this year?
Yeah, I think like you said, the encouraging thing in Detroit was that there was progression, but really the first 3 years they were bad the first two, then kind of mediocre. And then that last year they were really good and they had a lot of injuries as well. So I think you give him credit for that. And then the year after he leaves, they were much healthier and the defense declined a lot. But also, like you said, an offense like they had puts the defense in great spots to be effective, especially for a play caller like Glenn. You could blitz more and be a lot more creative if the other team is in pass mode the whole time. So there's context to it. And the Jets probably won't have that significant of an advantage this year. So it will be interesting to see, because even then he was just the defensive coordinator. And now we're looking at a situation where with no play calling duties last year, he still seemed kind of overwhelmed in that head coaching role. And now he's throwing this on top of that, the defensive play calling responsibility. So how does he balance those two things? Can he progress as a head coach overall while also throwing this back onto his plate? It's a really challenging situation that he's kind of created for himself. So I'm curious to see how it all looks. And like you said, the defense, it will be better because it's just impossible to be worse than that. And on paper, they have decent talent. There's a lot of holes plugged. I think the run defense especially could be very, very good. I think their ceiling is just kind of capped because they don't have a ton of pass rush depth. They still have, a lot of youth and unproven players in the secondary. So the pass defense is kind of limited, I would say, for the time being, with some of these players being young, like David Bailey, D'Angelo Pons. But I think the run defense can be really good, and hopefully they can, force some takeaways to flip some of these close games in their favor. But I expect a big leap, and that doesn't mean they're going to be good. It's just because they were so low that being 20th would be a big leap.
How about an interception, Michael? Am I asking too much?
We'll start. I mean, Cam Ward in week 1, I think it's a good opportunity to break it pretty quick. He's starting in a new offensive scheme. He's got a rookie wide receiver with him. Miscommunication tipped into the hands of Brandon Stevens, although he'd probably still drop it just like he did against Rodgers in week 1 last year. So, man, I hope they get it in week 1 so we don't have to keep hearing about it.
I don't know where you stand on this. I think week 1 is as close to a must win as a week 1 game could actually be. I know there's 16 other games after, and people with the Jets aren't thrilled that I'm talking about week 1 being a must win, but like if you're a Jet fan, we just know how this goes. It's like, here we go again. You lose to Robert Saleh. Like now I'm going to expect you to beat the Packers, the Lions, and the Bears. Oh my, like I see another dreaded winless start, and the season's cooked before we get going again. And obviously Glenn would be cooked in that scenario. How do you view week 1? How important is it in the, big picture of the season as a whole?
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think, and again, like must win, it's not literal in that sense. Like they might sweep the NFC North after that. No one knows how it'll go. Obviously, there's a lot of time left, but the potential value of winning that game is so high for the Jets in their situation, because things just tend to snowball with this franchise. It's like, I think that's where the losing culture is really kind of having its greatest impact, is that, the Jets have had nice moments over the years. Like there are fleet 2022, 2023, they started 4-3, but it's just the moment that things go bad, they go really bad and they don't know how to stop it. So you started 0-7 last year. If you lose week 1 to your former head coach and all the narratives that come with that and the schedule you have after that, it could snowball again and suddenly another season's over and there's no hope. So I think this is a tremendous opportunity to crush a lot of narratives, to make a statement and kind of immediately affirm that things are going to be different this time around. So I think that's why it's so important, because this team, the culture of this team, they just need to start to learn how to be stable and not allow things to, like, okay, we lost the game, we're going to be 0-7 now. I think it would change a lot to win this first game and just make that statement that, things are different than last year.
Amen. And I'll be there with a bunch of Jet fans. So we need a win in the worst way. If you're an Asmaniac who's on the fence, you got to get to Nashville. Must win for the Jets. We have the link to RSVP to our party at Barstool Nashville, the best bar in Nashville. Free event if you RSVP from 4 to 7. I'm doing a live show from down there. And tailgate tickets are on sale now at GameDayFlightCrew.com. It's $75 for the tailgate ticket. Includes food and beverages, of course. It's $85 after July 1. So lock in your spot if you're coming to Nashville. The links for the tailgate and the pre-party are in the description for the show you're watching right now. Let's get to a gifted membership here. Derek, the Kansas Jet fan in the house. Derek in the Asmaniac raffle for the Jalen Brunson finals jersey for 1.
Jet up. Let's go.
Derek, thank you. The Dream in the house. He's in for 2. Andrew C. says, for Glenn to be back, the defense has to look pretty impressive, even if they lose games, and the play calling on defense looks good. That makes a huge difference. The defense, if there are a reason why the Jets are winning games, but the offense just stinks, Gino's washed, whatever it is, that could help Glenn if it's like the Salah 7-10 with Zach Wilson as his quarterback. Like if the defense is truly the reason why they have any wins, I do think that will matter, at least in the eyes of Woody Johnson.
Yeah, I think you just got to be nuanced with it. And sometimes I don't think teams do that. I think they do look at, talking about ownership, they will look at win-loss, but, from a fan perspective, and if Woody's doing this the right way, I think you look at it in that lens, separate the limitations of the quarterback or certain positions that haven't been built up yet and just look at, what is Aaron Glenn's effect on the team? That's the simple question that needs to be answered.
Exactly. It's amazing we're here, but that's what happens when you go 3-14 in year 1. Andrew C. writes in, Faria said it best the other day. Week 1 is on a must win, but it's a can't lose. Yeah, I mean, look, if they lose week 1 and then beat the Packers, hand up, I was wrong. I just don't see it. Like, sorry, I'm not going to give the Jets the benefit of the doubt given their history in the last 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, we did get the Micah Parsons news, so that's a positive for them in that game. That defense, the whole team really struggled after he went out. So I think their odds in week 2 went up a little bit, but we're still talking about the Green Bay Packers and the New York Jets. And this is why winning week 1 would be so big. You have such a different level of confidence if you go into another team's home opener, the new head coach, new OC, second year, number 1 overall quarterback, star receiver prospect, and spoil all of that. The Jets haven't been on that side of many games in recent years. So it would be a big statement for that reason.
Well, if you think about it, if they could win week 1, you could talk yourself into, can we just win one of the next 3? And then if you're in a spot where you're 2-2 before you play the Browns, let's say that's a win. 3-2 New York Jets. We're playing into October already with a winning record. You got the Pats. Okay, maybe you lose that, but then Dolphins, Raiders. Like there's a realistic path to 4-4 if you prove you can beat the Titans.
Yeah, just it's the way the NFL schedule is set up and just how small it is. That's why these early season games are so important, because you see teams go on late winning streaks, and like the Saints just did, and they're 6-11, 7-10, and whatever. But if you can't get those early season wins, you're going to be out of it really quickly. You're instantly in the playoffs in the NFL for all intents and purposes, because you start 0-3, you're done. It's just, except who was that? Houston recently who came out of that, but the Jets don't play in the AFC South, so that never applies for the Jets. So you got to start fast, not even fast, just like competently enough so you could have a chance when you get to midseason.
I saw you wrote a story, I believe it was you, on Jet X, talking about the ESPN FBI rankings. Any issue with the Jets being at 31 out of 32 teams?
I mean, my stance is always going to be, I get it, because it just, if we pretended the Bills play this way, no Jets fan would ever give them benefit of the doubt in terms of their outlook. So it's just hard for me to expect anyone who's not a Jets fan to have any semblance of confidence in them. But I mean, I think there's a few teams they're better than who get ranked ahead of them, like Arizona, Raiders, Cleveland. But until we see it, I guess I understand why they're down there. But especially, I was going to say defensively, but even offensively, the on paper talent is kind of there. You're just waiting to see, do they have the coaching and the quarterback to bring this together and allow the whole to be even equal to the sum of the parts? I think that's the biggest question, because quarterbacking and coaching for the Jets, I think, have allowed them or caused them to consistently win fewer games than they really should based on the on paper talent. That's not to say they should have won any championships or anything, but 23 and 24 should not be winning 7 games. 22 should not be winning 7 games. Even 2019, I think, could have been better than that. So those two questions have been the biggest issue for the Jets.
Well, you look at the offensive talent in particular, because you brought it up, and I've made this point. What awful football team has a really good offensive line? Like, only the Jets pulled off that feat last year, winning 3 games with a very good, above average level offensive line. This year, they have, no matter how anyone feels about Geno, he's way better than Justin Fields. They have at least a professional at the quarterback spot. Again, if you remove Jets from the helmet and just look at the talent, Garrett Wilson, we talked about him at the top of our show here, Michael, A.D. Mitchell, Sadiq, Cooper, Mason Taylor, Brees. Like, there's players on this offense here. It's really on Frank Reich to maximize some of the abilities of these guys.
Yeah, and you brought up a really interesting point with the offensive line, because I remember last year, we expected the offensive line to be pretty solid, and it was. But around this time last year, I was researching. I did an article on, how high is the team's floor because of the offensive line. And like you said, generally speaking, if you have a good offensive line, you at least shouldn't be really bad. Doesn't mean you win the Super Bowl or win 15 games, but it is very rare to see teams with a good offensive line who win 3 games like the Jets ended up doing. And that's just because they were, so bad in pretty much every other area. But at least this year, you're hoping that, Geno is competent enough, that the defense is competent enough, that having an offensive line like that should give you the floor of, let's start with 7 wins and see if we could steal a couple, get to 9, 10, whatever it may be. Because the offensive line is the biggest floor raiser. It prevents turnovers. It helps you chew clock late in the game, control the clock throughout the game. Those are the things the offensive line does for you. And it's hard to lose a ton of games when you have that type of advantage. So hopefully the Jets have enough outside of the offensive line to, make the most of what an offensive line gives you.
Hey, here's the deal. Just got no chance unless you click on that like button. And you got to make sure you subscribe to the Jake Asman Show. You don't, you can get the f*** out. Now let's go, Asmaniacs. We're built for this shit.